BB for Hodier and straight black pride, brothers and sisters. This is your brother DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and our iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. Also, you can check us out at onthewakeupradio.com. That's onthewakeupradio.com. Also, you can check out videos at OTW Tube. That's OTW Tube. BB for Hody and Straight Black Pride to Sister Fonessa. Greetings to Unique One Express, who I just saw the other day. BB for Hody and brother, you got ripped off. Brother, you got ripped off with that message for me. And peace and blessings to Brother Crow. Yeah, I'm gonna get to that, brother. Thank you for the reminder. Quickly, again, we are a mere couple of days away from the Africa versus Everybody lecture in honor of Dr. Chancellor Williams and his book, Destruction of Black Civilization. That will be Saturday, December 31st at noon. Tickets are $20 available via Eventbrite keyword SBPM DC. For those who, I was looking and I'm reading BB 48 Island. I'm redoing the lecture and I was looking for old video from the last time I did it. Apparently I didn't do it last year, which I didn't realize. So the last time I did it was, I guess, 2019. And I couldn't find the full video for that, which was interesting. I went through all my video files and couldn't find it. So it's been, I guess, unless you've been following me for a while, this lecture is gonna look pretty new for most of you all. Like I said, I'm in the midst of redoing the second half of it. Updating some things and changing some things around. And I was looking at it and I was like, even though this is old to me, it's gonna be new to some people. And then it's just some things that are just gonna be reinforcement of things that we should know, but we don't know. So you can consider this almost like a preliminary, or like a prelim to that lecture, because we're going to be dealing about Africa and the U.S. and this U.S. summit. Also, well, let me tell you what sparked this first of all. So here's what sparked it, right? I hadn't really seen too many people talking about it. And people I saw, I think it was one person from the continent and one person, I think, from England. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I saw that so this shows you how goofy our people are, right? I'm looking on Instagram and some people put up a headline and they say that there's gonna be 55 billion, and we'll discuss that $55 billion investment in Africa. And somebody, a Negro, because I'm gonna say you're a Negro if you this stupid. Greetings to Sister Matrell. Was like, they're giving reparations to Africa. Now, I understand this Instagram, and you only saw the what do you call it? The headline. But that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? And if you understand U.S. foreign policy, if you study this in any way, shape, or form, you know good and well there's no way that there's nothing that's going to be given away for free, right? By the United States government. So once I read that and I saw somebody else say something similar, I was like, okay, I have to address this. I can't address it in a short form because it's not an issue that you can address really in 10 minutes. It wasn't really covered that well in the video media. And so I'm like, I actually gotta like pick up the articles, read articles, and then decode the articles based upon previous experience with studying European foreign policy and what it really means once you decode it, right? So that's what we're going to do tonight. So if you have not got your tickets for the lecture, I believe actually, yeah, the link is in the description for this video and the last video last night. Last night we discussed the whole Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez fiasco. I was giving some young brothers, some advice, and then I saw today that a young boxer from Baltimore, up well, he's a well known in the boxing world, Javante Tank Davis, protege of Floyd Mayweather, and I saw he was arrested for a domestic situation with his I don't know how many children he has, but this sister is the mother of at least one of his children. Um, and I talked about that. not that I think it'll mean anything, but I have half a mind to do a men's channel, man, just to give some young brothers advice. And I hear a lot of people doing it, but I don't know really. I don't really know how sincere these people are with the advice they're giving. It's some people I would recommend. Like if somebody asked me, "Hey, is there anybody on YouTube you recommend for young brothers to listen to?" It's a couple of people I would, just not necessarily from an African perspective, but just from a basic life skills, street um life experience perspective. It's some people I would do behind the scenes. Also, I want to announce that we're working on, okay, what, how can I put it? We're considering, but I'm gonna announce it here, doing a weekly men's call-in um, for brothers who are race first, who live in areas where they don't have a lot of other like-minded people around, and we can build with each other, just fellowship, uh, like a conference call type thing to start off. So that is something that has been put on the table. We haven't. Um, it depends on how it's received by the community. If it's something that brothers feel like is needed, then we'll move forward with it. If not, then it's something that'll be tabled, and that's just one less thing that I have I have to do. So I don't know how many brothers we even got here in the chat. If there's any brothers that would actually be interested in that, what we're probably looking at is one, like a weekly call in where we just check on each other, man. Just discuss different issues that brothers are having, discuss events going on in the world and things like that. And like I said, just fellowship, man, with like-minded people. And I'm talking to people, and more and more brothers saying they feel isolated, and not a lot of people that they can build with that really understand what's going on. I think I talked about it before. Therapy is good in theory, but an African man having therapy with uh, with a Negro, or even worse, a Negress, could be disastrous. If just being completely honest. So that's an idea we have on the table for 2023. Probably at earliest that will start would be February. The brother you got ripped off put the email, my email address, if anybody is interested, would be interested in that, and then we can gauge interest and begin to make plans. to get that up and operational. So again, Africa versus everybody lecture I'll be presenting. You can see it via live stream, or if you're in the DMV area, you can come out to the SBPM headquarters, which is in the Empowerment Center, 6490 Landover Road, Cheverly, Maryland, 20785. Again, the live stream will start at noon. The live stream will actually be starting at 12:30, but we'll have some intro music and everything like that. Y'all know how I do. If you've seen lectures before, also in a couple of weeks we'll be honoring Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. In essence, 2 weeks after that. And those tickets also will be $20 via Eventbrite, and they will go on. Those tickets should be available either Monday or Tuesday of next week. Yeah, thank you, brother. Also, we have polls that if you go to the page, go to the community part of this page. We have polls of different questions that are put up, just trying to gauge and see where the people are at. So yeah, so with those announcements, let us move forward with these articles that we're going to get into. And I'm going to add my banner. And of course, it says you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical1, on Twitter, dc_radical_one, on OTWTube at dcradical1. The Cash App, if you want to donate, this $ dcradical1. Of course, this is the YouTube, capital D, small c, and the email is dc.radical_one at protonmail.com. Now, we're going to look at, I believe, 4 articles and a video. And one is from before the event, and then we'll have one after the event, and then one that actually doesn't have anything to do with the event, and we'll have one video. So the goal was to get this done by 9:30, but since it's already 8:20, we shall see. So with that, let us begin. This article is from Politico. I must admit, I like Politico. They get a lot of quotes from political insiders, and they're pretty stand up. You won't get like inside information, but you'll get inside as far as what political leaders are thinking and saying, but you won't get the behind the scenes stuff because, I mean, come on, we know what's going on. But it says under foreign policy, says if it's just symbolic, it's going to be a disaster. Biden's Africa summit challenge. Says Biden is set to host dozens of African leaders for a 3-day summit starting Tuesday. So again, this was before the actual summit. Let us read. Says President Joe Biden has a tough task ahead of him when he convenes African leaders in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. Woo them away from China. Let's stop right there. So if anybody was wondering what's the purpose of this, why is the U.S. reaching out to Africa all of a sudden? The U.S. is giving away our reparation, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. It's right here. But I mean, before you can even get started, it says simply, China has made a move for Africa. China has made inroads in Africa, right? And we'll talk about that more in the lecture. And they said his job, Biden's job, is to woo Africa from China to America. Now, I don't have the clip here, but I do have the clip in one of the lectures, and you will see who Mr. Biden actually represents while he's trying to do this wooing. All right, let's get back to the article. Now, it says Biden's challenge will be to convince African leaders that his administration is ready to deliver robust diplomatic and economic engagement on the continent, and that he'll commit the necessary resources to rival China's as Africa's superpower of choice. Let's stop right here again. Let's look at the wording of it. This presupposes right here, right? This presupposes that the continent of Africa, with its, I believe, 54 nations, and most of the major resources on planet Earth, including virtually untapped water supply underneath the Sahara Desert, which we'll discuss more later, right? This presupposes that those nations are in need of anything from outside sources when they have all the resources. Africa has the gold, Africa has the oil, Africa has the arable land, Africa has cobalt, Africa has man, I forgot what there's a mineral that is needed to create these computers and these phones and all this stuff. Africa has that. You name it, Africa has it. But they saying that they want to woo Africa and be America's superpower of choice, when in reality, Africa could be its own superpower if they simply united amongst themselves. Plain and simple. Okay, now let's go forward. Many African leaders feel like they've already been fooled once when President Barack Obama used the first such summit in 2014 to signal growing commitment to the continent. Instead, Obama cut funding to combat AIDS in Africa and reduced foreign aid to the region. Again, let's stop right here. I don't like Obama. Period. In the discussion. However, if Obama cut, I would love to see the details of that. Because if he cut funding to combat AIDS, the Cotan, thank you, brother. The question is, what medicine was going to be used for the AIDS, right? To quote unquote cure or treat the AIDS. Obama may have accidentally done them a favor, because more than likely, whatever you were getting was going to be something funded by Gates and concocted by people like Mr. Fauci. Again, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to give Obama credit. You know what I'm saying? It's probably more sheer accident than anything else. Let's move forward. It says China, meanwhile, has become sub-Saharan Africa's #1 trading partner. Again, whenever you read sub-Saharan Africa, just transform that to black. They talking about black Africa. Through imports of everything from textiles to smartphones, while purchasing massive volumes of African agricultural products and commodities, including copper and oil. And Beijing has built roads and ports across Africa over the past 2 decades, while regularly increasing its foreign aid to the continent. We're going to stop right there. Now, I can't show you all this book. And I don't have the book up here. But with that said, if we have our book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, books, either book 1 or book 2, I have book 1, right? We understand that foreign aid, regardless of who it comes from, always comes with a catch. If you have not read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, he discusses how he helped fund people like Osama bin Laden, right, while working for the US government. And he discusses how he made sure that the House of Saud stayed in power when people were trying to overthrow him. And he discusses how they get people to accept deals for people's resources, countries' resources, even though the leaders know the deals are a bad deal, and how he quote unquote convinces them to take the deal. And he discusses the types of accidents that can occur if a leader doesn't take the deal. Again, so we're going to discuss foreign aid. We're discussing it through the lens of Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Again, this is a European. This ain't me. This is a European who said that. And brother, you got ripped off says he held the funding until they accepted Eurocentric sexuality. And once the countries agreed, they turned the money faucet back on. Well, thank you, brother. You have explained it perfectly. I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember, but because it's Obama, I should have known that it had something to do with homophilia. And if you know, you know. Now, says, and Chinese foreign ministers have made Africa their first foreign destination of each new calendar year since 1991. So, in essence, China has been trying to make a move on Africa since I got knowledge as a teenager. That's how long that's been going on. On top of that, China has more potential friends in Africa than the US because its diplomatic outreach has embraced countries regardless of their respect for democracy or human rights. Now, here's what's interesting with that, right? We're here in America. And if there are any people who knows the hypocrisy of United States democracy, as Malcolm X, paraphrasing Malcolm X, it would be Black people. So the idea that America is going to be the judge of whether or not people are protecting and respecting people's human rights and their rights as a human being, of course, to us is a horrible joke. I mean, it is a ridiculous joke. I mean, we're still at the point where, if you're a young Black male, anytime you walk outside, walk down the street, there's a chance of you meeting a police officer having a bad day and you won't make it home. This is just a fact. This is the life we live every day, all day. And yet, the US wants to tell us about respecting human rights. Anyway, let's move forward. Africa has always, man, I mean, this European spills the beans right here. He says Africa has always been at the bottom of the US foreign policy priority list, and this is equally true for the Biden administration, said David Shin, former ambassador to Ethiopia with extensive diplomatic experience across Africa. The US will, quote unquote, pound the table and say, you've got to clean up your act and engage in free and fair elections, while the Chinese just hold their nose and basically deal with the government in charge. Let's stop right there. The Chinese are not holding their nose, right? The Chinese regime is just as corrupt as any other regime on earth. The American regime is just as corrupt as any other regime on earth. The Israeli regime is just as corrupt as any other regime on earth. See, this lie, right, that Africa is the only place on earth that's corrupt. The whole world is corrupt because the whole world is being ruled by the small hats. But I digress. Let's get back to the article. It says Africa is important to the U.S. as a growing market for American products, as well as a source of commodities, including cobalt and lithium, essential to U.S. rapidly expanding electric vehicle industry. Make note of that. We're going to come back to that. The U.S. also sees Africa as essential to its national security due to Islamic, quote unquote, terrorist groups in the region, including Boko Haram in West Africa and Al Shabaab in the Horn of Africa. Now, I'm not going to get into how, because again, I mentioned it in it's in Confessions of Economic Hitman. I'm not going to get into how these groups are offshoot of American groups, right? That America helped fund and set up in other parts of the world, and how these groups that they claim now are a threat to America is just blowback from the activities that they were doing in other countries. We're not going to discuss that because we're not here to discuss that today, right? All right. Now, ahead of the summit, the Biden administration announced that the president will throw his support behind getting the African Union a permanent G20 seat. Let's stop right there. So they want to get the African Union, the entire body, in essence, a loose confederation of African states, one seat on the G20. I mean, okay. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said the move reflects the administration's recognition, of the need for quote unquote more African voices in international conversations about the world's most pressing issues. Stop right there. What this is really about, to be honest, is one, trying to get Africa away from siding with China and Russia in the conflict that is to come, right? And also, Russia, because of their beating back the homophile assault and trying to purge their country and the Ukraine of homophilia, Russia has an affinity with Africa because they're also largely culturally against homophilia. And basically, the leaders have had to bend to that, right? So the pressure, that external pressure from the West, is to get them to bend to homophilia. But the internal pressure from the people is to get them to stand up straight against homophilia. And so most of those leaders are walking a tightrope with that. Now, that kind of recognition could also help the U.S. in international forums. At a time when America is seeking to counter growing Chinese influence in multilateral organizations, the administration has noted that Africa boasts one of the largest regional voting groups in the United States, right? But Beijing may be ahead in the soft power arena too. In September, African countries constituted almost half of the 28 states that supported a Chinese resolution to reject allegations of crimes against humanity in Xinjiang as disinformation. China-Africa relations are the bedrock of China's foreign policy. The Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Qin Gang, I guess I'm saying that right, aid at the Semaphore Africa Summit on Monday. One difficulty for Biden, he'll have to convince African leaders to choose the U.S. over China without mentioning China. African leaders don't want their countries to become a playground for world powers using the continent for their Cold War initiatives against each other, said Zenat Adam, a former director of the Horn of Africa section of South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Perhaps to that end, summit organizers insist the event has nothing to do with Beijing. That's a lie. The meeting is not about other countries and their engagement, quote unquote, with Africa, a senior administration official said, on condition of anonymity in a press brief. Wait a minute, hold up. How do you have anonymity in a press briefing? Anyway, on Thursday. Not so, says Senator Chris Van Hollen, that dude's a liar, from Maryland, who serves on the Africa subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. we're in trouble if he's on it. That's his post. The summit will show that the U.S. offers a better, more sustainable economic model that treats our partners more fairly than Beijing treats theirs, Van Hollen said. That model's strength is in contrast to China's coercive brand of debt trap diplomacy, he said. Beijing moved to silence such accusations by forgiving loans of 17 African country borrowers in August. Let's stop right there. Here's the thing, right? The debt trap diplomacy that they're talking about has really been brought forth, and prime examples of it is shown in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which is why I picked up this book today for this discussion. Everything that they're accusing China of is something that they mastered long ago, and the Chinese learned from them. Greetings, Bobby E. Wright. So, again, what the U.S. is really doing is saying these people are beating us at our own game. Now, does any of this benefit Africa? We're going to get into another article and discuss that. So, moving forward, says for many African leaders, the last U.S. president who delivered for Africa was George W. Bush. That's, man, anyway, whose PEPFAR program has saved millions of lives by distributing affordable drugs, to treat HIV/AIDS. They were disappointed that Obama's personal ties to the continent, his father was born in Kenya, didn't translate into more attention, and the Trump administration alternately ignored and insulted Africa. Hey, man, that sounds exactly like Mr. Trump in real life. I can't do nothing but laugh. Biden's negligible one-to-one diplomatic outreach with African leaders hasn't encouraged a sense of things are changing. He's held few calls with African leaders, and instead of confirming formal bilateral sessions during the summit, organizers have instead curated a number of substantive little moments between Biden and visiting African leaders, the senior administration official said. That puts pressure on Biden to deliver on his pledge in July that the summit will offer new economic engagement to African leaders skeptical of U.S. commitment to the region. It says, if it's just symbolic, it's going to be a disaster because nobody can do symbolism better than the Chinese, said Tibor Nagy, former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. That won't happen, says organizers. There are going to be major deliverables and initiatives, the senior administration official said, of course, without elaborating. The U.S. rivalry with China and Africa mirrors their geostrategic competition in other parts of the world. It's a race for diplomatic influence and access to markets and resources. But unlike in Asia or the Middle East, the U.S. has a significant disadvantage in Africa because Washington has done less to keep up with Beijing's efforts in Africa than it has in other regions. The Biden administration's agenda for the summit includes initiatives to advance peace and security on the continent, improve food security. Stop right there. No, hold up. No, we're going to finish this. Improve food security and help African countries cope with climate crisis. Okay. We're going to stop there on this article. Now, who is the number one person that the U.S. will turn to, and what product would they use in order to, quote unquote, fight food insecurity in Africa? I'll give y'all a few minutes while I drink some water. And Sister Matrell said that's the scary part. What part is the scary part, sister? Elaborate for me, because there's a lot of bad stuff in that. I don't know if you're talking about what I just read, or what Brother You Got Ripped Off is putting up with as far as Africa. And brother, you got ripped off said this garbage writing is focused on the viewpoints of everyone but the Africans themselves. Yeah, and that's why I read it. Because I want us to decode decode the propaganda. Um in this at this time, my good brother, you are not quite correct. Not quite. Who's the number one person? American involvement in food on the continent is absolutely it's disturbing. And the reason it's disturbing because it's going to be in the hands of Bill Gates. Yeah, brother. Yeah, you got it now. Say we do not want their seeds, their GMO. Exactly. You got it, sister. Bill Gates will fight food insecurity with Terminator seeds that keep anything from growing. The fact of the matter is Africa has more arable land than any place on earth. And if they simply organize themselves properly, they can feed themselves. And not only can they feed themselves, they can feed the entire planet. So y'all got it. All right, let's get on to because this was the before article. I'm gonna go down and make sure there's nothing else of use here. Oh wait a minute, hold up. We got a lot. We got a lot more article to go. All right, let's take a look at this. It says Biden summit goal of advancing peace and security in Africa reflects U.S. geostrategic concerns about China's growing military footprint in the region. The People's Liberation Army established a military base in Djibouti in 2017, sparking U.S. Africa Command's security concerns about its base just a few miles away. Then AFRICOM Chief General Stephen Townsend warned in March that China was eyeing Equatorial Guinea as a site of its second regional base. We have to talk to our African partners about what we see as dangers of having that type of influence on their soil. A senior Defense Department official told reporters Thursday. The official required anonymity as a condition of his briefing. The Pentagon is also concerned about Chinese telecom giant Huawei, whatever, dominance on the continent's 4G networks. The FCC declared Huawei a national security threat in 2020. Use of Huawei technology may limit information sharing with certain African countries, said a senior Defense Department official. But former U.S. diplomats blame Huawei's popularity in Africa on a U.S. failure to provide affordable alternatives. We were telling people not to buy Huawei, but then they said, okay, so what should we buy instead? And there was no way to match Huawei's price or the financial terms, said Nagy, the former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. African leaders will look to Biden to deliver on a promise to channel funds from the G7 Infrastructure Investment Program to projects in Africa. That could include an extension of an Obama-era program expiring in 2025 that gave tariff-free status to certain African imports. Biden can also take steps to address Africa's concerns about the regional impact of the climate crisis by honoring his pledge that the summit will advance U.S. climate cooperation. Again, let's stop right there with the climate. And Sister Matrell said Monsanto has a huge presence in Africa already, but they may be owned by Gates by now. I'm not sure if they're owned by Gates, but I'm sure that they are working in partnership. And brother, you got ripped off said micro Asian militaries in Africa doing genocidal attacks on the native African people. Absolutely. And you got ripped off says if anyone watched the last Jurassic World movie, they perfectly showed how they're creating GMO tech foods with DNA altered I gotta put that up, brother. Hold on. Let me see. Can I put that up? Because I did not see that. Let's see. Brother says, anyone watch? One thing about the movies, they'll tell you what's going on if you're paying attention. So that is that article. And again, that was the before article. Oh, hold up. Unique One Express says, I just saw a video posted of Bill Gates talking about and warning of a new time and place for another pandemic coming soon. He's done that for a while. And brother, you got Rich all says Huawei had a spy on the inside of the US government. Yeah. Putting the control of your technology and your telecommunications, excuse me, in the hands of a foreign power that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, there's no way we can't buy this stuff, break it down, and reverse engineer it, because that's literally what the Asians did to get their place in the world. They bought U.S. and Russian technology, broke it down, and then reverse engineered it for their own technology. But we don't think that way, man. It's frustrating. All right, so that is that article. We're gonna move to the second article, and it says the U.S. scramble for Africa. Well, he's getting straight to the point. Let's see if I can get some of the stuff off the screen. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, whatever. Whatever, just get the stuff off the screen. We'll worry about that later. By Marwan Bishara. So Marwan, I believe that's an Arab or Persian name. So probably an Arab or Persian. And he's showing, the picture shows Senegal President Macky Sall. Not familiar with him. All right. It says the Biden administration is convening a United States Africa summit in Washington this week after having announced a new strategy for the continent in the summer. Now comes the hard part: restoring lost trust and credibility in their relationship, which suffered terribly under the Trump administration. The new scramble for Africa is part of. I'm just laughing because this guy's just like, he just straight to the point. He's like, come on, man, we know what this is. The new scramble for Africa is part of Joe Biden's effort to shore up dwindling American influence in various parts of the world, from Latin America to the Indo-Pacific, through Africa and the Middle East, where other powers, notably its nemesis China, are making considerable inroads economically and strategically. Beijing's success in Africa has been of particular annoyance to Washington. During the past 20 years, China has grown its influence on the continent at the expense of all Western powers, including the former colonial powers Britain and France. The latter's neo-colonial project, Afrique, has also suffered setbacks in recent years in Mali, the Central African Republic, and the broader Sahel region because of Russia strengthening its presence. Like I think I talked about that before. Other countries such as Togo, Gabon, and Rwanda, once a part of the French sphere of influence, have chosen to align themselves more with Britain or China in recent years. China's direct state involvement in Africa through loans and mega infrastructural and technological projects, from ports to power stations, had made it harder for others like the United States to compete. The investment fervor may cool off as more government struggles with paying back their loans following the pandemic, creating the risk of a Chinese takeover of their national air assets like ports and airports. Again, back to our book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Those plans and how that works is laid out perfectly in that book. The United States is literally, China is literally pulling a page from the United States playbook from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. To make headway, China has prioritized development over democracy and human rights, which suits authoritarian regimes, but undermines Biden's agenda, as one coup d'etat after another has plagued the continent over the past 2 years. I like how this article just says that coups are happening, but doesn't say anything about who could possibly be behind this stuff. I find that interesting. Now, after the coup in Mali in 2020, there was a failed coup attempt at Niger in March 2021, and then a successful one in Chad in April. Guinea followed in September, and Sudan in October 2021. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called it an epidemic of coup d'etats. Let me be clear. The U.S. is no beacon of human rights. Far from it. Indeed, the U.S. has long prioritized geopolitics over human rights and continues to place its interests above its proclaimed values. Still, today's democratic backslide on the continent does not serve American, let alone African interests. Good governance is paramount for any good to come out of continents bargaining with rich and powerful foreigners, or for any good to trickle down to those who need it most. Besides, why let the Biden administration off the hook when it could be held accountable for its commitments to strengthening human rights globally? You're going to strengthen human rights, you got to start at home, and they haven't done much to do that now, have they? If Biden needed a wake-up call, it may come early this year when, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the U.S. failed to enlist the support of African nations at the UN, where they represent more than 1/4 of the General Assembly members. Think about that, brothers and sisters. Africa is 1/4 of the General Assembly, and if they could vote at a block, they can stop a lot of things. Says when voting on a draft resolution to freeze Russia's membership at the UN Human Rights Council, only 10 of 54 African nations voted in favor, 9 voted against, and the rest either abstained or did not show up for the vote. Worse, South Africa, among America's leading partners on the continent, championed the abstention vote, which I find interesting because they're basically ruled by hats, in the economy of South Africa is controlled by hats still. Says now the Biden administration says it wants to resume the work of the Obama administration, which held the first U.S. Africa summit in 2014. We talked about that before, by pursuing an African agenda free of the usual paternalism and based on mutual interest and mutual respect. It pledges to listen to instead of lecturing its African partners, and to pursue sustainable policies that are best interests of the continent. In that spirit, the U.S. will not bring up the 800-pound gorilla in the room, China, during the summit. U.S. officials have indicated they will not ask African leaders to choose sides, but the U.S. strives to be the continent's partner of choice, quote unquote. That is smart, considering that many would choose China anyway. But America continues to command goodwill on the continent, as polling by Afrobarometer shows 60% of Africans believe that the U.S. has had a positive economic and political influence in their country, right behind China at 63%, but far ahead of Russia at 35% and the colonial powers at 46%. Let's stop right there. So according to this poll, nearly half of people on the continent believe that they've had a better economic and political relationship with their former colonial masters, or have had a good one. Nearly half, which is more than Russia, that has no colonies in Africa. Way more, 11% more, but less than China and the U.S. All right, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm just kind of confounded by my goodness. That just goes to show, man, that our people still worship Europeans. How nearly half of African people polled could think that former colonial masters could have a positive influence economically and politically in their countries, man. That's disappointing, to say the least. Right? So next we're gonna go to, because I think this article it has a lot of the same information. So we're gonna go to the briefing on what they said was accomplished, and this is pretty long, so we're not gonna go through the whole thing. It says digital press briefing on U.S. Africa Leaders Summit outcomes. And this is directly from the U.S. Department of State, the State Department. And I could have got the audio file. So after giving his greetings and blah, 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 so forth, so on, says, good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for joining me today. It's good to have the opportunity to speak to you all as we reflect on a U.S. Africa Leaders Summit that took place last week. Says we had a busy week over the course of the summit. My team and I had productive discussions on how the U.S. and African nations can partner to tackle global challenges that affect us all. And the foundation of all of this is partnership. Stop right there. Partnership is one of those words. If you ever watched the World Economic Forum, have a discussion, you always hear this partnership word. You usually hear it in conjunction with private-public partnership, which the way that normally works is the public does the paying and the private receives the benefit. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like that Bugs Bunny math. If you ever seen that Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs Bunny is counting, and he's counting 1 for you, 1 for me, 2 for you, 1, 2 for me. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how the public-private partnerships work, and any partnership that you have with these type of people. And Sister Matrell says, can you really believe that poll? Hopefully not. You know what I'm saying, sister? Hopefully not. But I'll be honest. Our people, regardless of where we are on the planet, love some white folks. So I'm taking the poll with a grain of salt. But at the same time, we know our people love some white folks. So we can't get past that part. Now it says partnership is the foundation of President Biden's strategy for Africa because we know that we can address the challenges of our time without bringing everyone to the table. That means government at every level, institutions, the private sector, and the African diaspora. Stop right there. If you ever read any of Klaus Schwab's books, I swear, if you read The Great Reset or Fourth Industrial Revolution or heard him speak, this is exactly like he talks. It's almost like he wrote this. I'm not shocked, but I'm just saying, I just notice it. Like when you start studying somebody so much, you get used to how they speak or how they write and the type of words they use and how they put stuff together. I swear this sounds like it's coming straight out the World Economic Forum. As the president announced, the administration plans to invest at least $55 billion in Africa over the next 3 years, working closely with our Congress. New investment and policy initiatives at the summit include the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat in order to promote equitable, sustainable, and inclusive trade, a trade that will be continent-wide, and a trade that will open up $3.4 trillion market of 1.3 billion people. That is a large market. It's a huge market, and that we intend to work on with this memorandum of understanding. Stop right there. Does anybody, I want us to do, we're going to do math, right? We're going to do math. Because right there, we get to the core of part of what this is about, right? Now, let's go back. He says the administration is going to invest at least $55 billion. Now, Negroes read this and said that they're giving reparations to Africa. No, they said they're going to invest $55 billion. But what do they get out of the $55 billion investment? They open up a market that is worth $3.4 trillion. That's 1,000 times more than what they're investing. That's what they're trying to reap the benefit of. and ingratiate themselves to 1.3 billion people to make them. Come on, man. Come on, man. To make them more psychologically enslaved than they already are. This is, I'm going to tell you all what this is like, right? So black people understand. This is the equivalent of a SEC school giving a scholarship, which may be worth, let's say it's worth $80,000, or maybe over 3 years. Let's say it's worth $50,000 a year over 3 years, so it's $150,000, right? To a 5-star running back, right? Or a Pac-10 school or whatever. Take your pick. And that 5-star running back comes in and he starts immediately. And he helps you go to a bowl game, and you get money from the bowl game, and you get the ticket receipts from the bowl game, and you get extra exposure from the bowl game. And because you had that bowl game, you get more recruiting, and you can bring in more players, and you sell more jerseys, and all the economic benefit that comes from that, right? In this first year. Then the second year, you go to the whole what they call it, the whatever the playoffs in college is, right? This guy helps you do that, and he goes to the Heisman ceremony, and whether he wins or not, he's there at the Heisman ceremony, and it raises the cachet of the school, and the donors, they're happy because you're winning more, and they donate more money, and the coach gets more money, and the school gets more money, and guess how much the student gets paid? He doesn't get paid anything. He gets the chance to make money later on when he goes to the NFL if he stays healthy. And when he goes to the NFL, guess what? He'll go to the NFL. He'll make a few $1,000,000 in his first few years because there's a cap on the salaries for the rookies. And then while he's doing that, he'll be selling thousands of jerseys and making millions of dollars and helping to sell tickets. And the owners are billionaires and the players are millionaires. And so basically that same relationship that you have with in athletics is the same concept in the same game that they're running here, right? They're going to invest 55 billion to try to make 3.4 trillion. Right? So we get it. Now, he says the Millennium Challenge Corporation has also announced its first regional compact totaling 504 million with the government of Benin, and Niger to support regional integration, trade, and cross-border collaboration in those two countries. In addition, the Millennium Challenge Corporation announced that the Gambia and Togo are eligible to develop their first contacts, that Senegal is eligible to develop a regional compact, and that Mauritania is eligible to develop a threshold program. Now, here's a question. Why couldn't these countries do this amongst themselves without the aid of the U.S.? So, I mean, that's all I got to say on that. Says then on December 13th, Nigeria and Rwanda became the first African countries to sign the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords are based on the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which were principles that advance the safe, sustainable, and responsible exploration and use of outer space. Now, something that I've read long ago is that there are already treaties outlining where countries can launch stuff into space, what areas of orbit they can have, and things like that. That they're in essence already dividing space. This sounds like that to me, which I find interesting, because that would mean that they believe that Nigeria or Rwanda have the capacity, possibly, for that type of technology. Otherwise, why would you be doing this unless you're trying to do some joint program? I find that interesting. I need to look into that further. Says during the week, I also had productive discussions with public and private. Here we go with that public-private, right? Sector partners, public-private partnership, right? On what? Strengthening the critical minerals and battery supply chains that help grow our economies and tackle the climate crisis. This is literally right out the book, Economic Hitman. This work continues. It continues to deepen collaboration to support diverse and secure critical mineral supply chains at all stages, not only on the mining side, but also on the processing side. To that end, I was pleased to join the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia presidents Tshisekedi. All right, I'm butchering these names. And Hichilema to sign a memorandum of understanding to demonstrate U.S. support for the DRC Zambia cooperation agreement to build a processing plant on the DRC Zambia border. Processing plant for what, you may say? This is an agreement that's going to develop an electronic vehicle value chain to help reduce carbon emissions and also support global response to climate crises, and the plan is to develop an EV battery supply chain that opens the door for U.S. and like-minded investors to keep more value added in Africa. Stop right here. Africa, of all places, has the least need for electric vehicles because Africa barely has the road infrastructure for those type of vehicles. Whatever carbon emissions and things that are going on in the world, Africa are not the primary culprit of that. So really, this does not benefit. This is just them using Africa and using what's going to be the use of cheap labor in order to make products for the U.S. as part of this World Economic Forum global agenda of quote unquote fighting climate, which is secretly, in my opinion, whenever you're talking about reducing carbon, you're talking about reducing people. You're the carbon that they want to produce. Greetings to Kepa Ra. I didn't see you come in. So again, these are the things that they agreed on. Says I also spent some time and met with several of my counterparts from DRC to continue our discussion on identifying ways to expand opportunities for sustainable economic development through the U.S. DRC Sustainable Development Solutions Working Group that we established a couple of months ago following Secretary Blinken's trip to the DRC. Together, we will continue to assess in this working group the environmental and social impacts of oil and gas exploration that will help achieve DRC's stated objective of ensuring that critical ecosystems are not damaged by potential extractive activities. We have also discussed in every forum that we had how, again, here's this word, right? How public-private partnerships can facilitate entrepreneurship and innovation. This is important because with Africa's largely youthful population, we need to find ways to bolster these partnerships by engaging with the private sector, including, and we have a delegation plan to go to Ghana in February that was announced at the summit's innovation gathering. We are also facilitating ecologically sound trade and investment between the U.S. and African nations and advanced diplomacy and look for ways to create growth, opportunity, and employment. We're going to stop right there, right? I think we understand how basically the African nations have signed up to be exploited. I'm not familiar with Mr. Blinken, but if I had to take a guess, you know what I'm saying? I can look it up and find out later. But if I had to take a guess, you know the guess I'm going to take, right? So that is the summary that they gave of the what they accomplished at the summit. Now, there was something that was interrelated but not a part of the summit that I wanted to go to. I saw this and I was like, hold up, wait a minute, right? Hopefully y'all can see this. And after we look at this, I'm gonna play a video that's very familiar. I'm just gonna play the video after we read this, because the video will be of a similar event. Because I couldn't find a video for this, but it will look very familiar once you get to that point. Oh, brother, see, I didn't remember that. Brother say on page 22 of Brother Jenny's book, Mr. Blinken is number 3 on the list of hats in the White House. See, I figured he was a hat, but I didn't remember seeing him. There were so many hats, man. I just got dizzy reading them. Thank you for that, brother. Now, it says catastrophic contagion, right? And this is from, and it says catastrophic contagion, a global challenge exercise. You're like, okay, what is this? If you look very closely, you see who? Bill Gates. Now it says the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with who? The World Health Organization and what? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, conducted a catastrophic contagion, a pandemic tabletop exercise at the Grand Challenges annual meeting in Brussels, Belgium, on October 23rd, 2022. That was 2 months ago. Says the extraordinary group of participants consisted of 10 current and former health ministers and senior public health officials from Senegal, Rwanda, Nigeria, Angola, Liberia, Singapore, India, Germany, as well as Mr. Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The exercise simulated a series of World Health Organization emergency advisory board meetings addressing a quote unquote fictional pandemic set in the near future. Participants grappled with how to respond to an epidemic located in one part of the world that then spreads rapidly, becoming a pandemic with a higher fatality rate than COVID-19 and disproportionately affecting children and young people. Participants were challenged to make urgent policy decisions with limited information in the face of uncertainty. Each problem had serious health, economic, and social ramifications. Stop right there. They're doing a tabletop exercise to see how they're going to respond to a pandemic with a higher fatality rate that affects who? Children and young people. And who are some of the countries that are there? Senegal, Rwanda, Nigeria, Angola, Liberia. So of the 10, hold on, how many countries are listed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, of the 8 countries that are listed, 5 of them are African. Only one is European, that's Germany. For this tabletop exercise. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a video that shows you what these things look like in person, right? And when I show this video, it's going to look very, very familiar. So, all right, check out this video.
epidemic events are getting more and more disruptive to health and to economy. And the reason we called it Event 201 is we knew eventually one of those days, one of those events would be the big one. And that big one would really challenge our capacity to respond. And to respond to the big one, we do need to have all hands on deck. Participants are confronted by a hypothetical scenario that presents to them the challenges of a response. So we will say, here's a hypothetical disease outbreak. This is the way it might be evolving. And these are some of the challenges that you'll see that you'll have to address to address the disruptions that you're seeing to your healthcare system or to your organization. All stakeholders realize pretty quickly just how underprepared we are and just how much is possible when we work together. And that the individual actions of any government or company won't add up to a proper global response. I think if we're honest with ourselves, collectively, the international community has never done enough to respond to global health security challenges. That we knew before COVID that the world was underprepared for biological risk. When we walked into the room in New York, if you would have asked, do you think the world is prepared for a pandemic? I think everyone around that table would have said no. But it's when they walked out, I think it's when we really knew that if we are going to get ready, we need to have operationalized and integrated public-private cooperation that we haven't seen before.
Now, Event 201 took place on October 18th, I believe, 2019, approximately 10 weeks before the declared outbreak of C-19. So I guess we should be thankful that they did a tabletop exercise to prepare for the calamity that C-19 was. It's an amazing coincidence, just a mere 10 weeks or so before that. And so now with this current tabletop exercise, it would be a weird coincidence if a similar type of situation would occur in the upcoming month or months. But, I just find it interesting, that occurred. And so I think that it's the timing of this tabletop exercise and then the timing of Mr. Biden's meeting with the African continent. And we've seen how these tabletop exercises can go. It would behoove African leaders to be very careful with these trade deals, with acceptance of any medicines coming from the Gates Foundation, and also with these food programs that they are offering, because we have seen throughout history, and again, Diary of Economic Hitman, for those who don't know, um, lays out many of those things. And as we've seen, Event 201 has, you know, Event 201 acts, I mean, prepared us for real life real quick, or it didn't prepare us because most of us didn't know about it. And again, that was that was from the World Economic Forum, but that was the World Economic Forum in conjunction with the Johns Hopkins Center for Health and Security, which happens to be what's on the screen here. This is the same. Okay, these are the same organizations running the same exercises that were run weeks before the outbreak of C-19. You can make of that what you will. And also, I guess I forgot to make my fair use declaration. This, of course, is only for educational purposes, and there was no intent to illegally use the video that was described. Yes, it appears so, because we have event 202. So by that sequencing, Sister Matrell, you're right on time. So, brothers and sisters, I think we have done not a super thorough examination, but I think we have done a thorough enough examination of the U.S. Africa Summit. I think we can see the ramifications of this event and the danger that lies in front of the African world. So, again, going to remind you all, this Saturday, Africa versus everybody, 12 noon. It's early. I heard that Bob Baruti is doing something as well in the afternoon. You can check him out as well. And then after you get all your African knowledge, you can go ahead and do whatever it is that you do to celebrate the European New Year. Again, the link for the lecture, for tickets for the lecture, will be in the description for this live stream. If you're in the DMV area, come on out. If you're not in the DMV area, hey, help us purchase a live stream. The money helps us with some of our programs. It helps me to continue to do stuff like this. And, as we see, there are many things going on in the world all the time, and it's hard to keep up with this stuff day by day. And really, their goal is to throw so much stuff at us that it makes our heads spin. And the reality is, we need as many people who are informed about what's going on globally and nationally, and how it affects Black people. And I'm one of the people that's been tasked with that job, doing the best I can with what I got. So again, you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical1, on Twitter at dc_radical_one, OTW2 at DC Radical 1. The Cash App, if you would like to support, it's $DC Radical 1. And then YouTube is capital D small C Radical 1. And the email is dc.radical_1 at protonmail.com. And there's been somebody that has been donating regularly to the Cash App. Shoot me an email so I know who that is, so I can shoot you a free ticket to either this week's lecture or the Dr. Khaled lecture, because I'm not, the name on the Cash App I'm not familiar with. So with that, brothers and sisters, I may chop up and make another short form video before Saturday, but for everybody here, I'm sure I will see you all Saturday, tomorrow I'll be and also I forgot. Happy Kwanzaa. Somebody remind me what today's principle of Kwanzaa is before we get off here. Brother, you got ripped off. I know you got me right, brother. Today's principle of Kwanzaa is, because I don't even know what day this is, to be completely honest. It's been a long week. Ujima. That's today's principle. Ujima. So with that, because tomorrow is Ujama. And I will be at Ujima Shule. Speaking of which, Ujima Shule, the oldest African center school in the country, and what is here in Washington D.C. And Baba Zulu will be having his annual Kwanzaa celebration. You can look him up on Facebook, and if you would like to donate to the Baba, he'll greatly appreciate it. I'll greatly appreciate it. I have in the past when I had better economic means, I had donated to him as well. Sister says collective work and responsibility to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. Ujima. Thank you, sister. And I'll just say this. There's a lot of controversy about Kwanzaa. I meant to have a brother on to really break that stuff down. I will just say this. One, there's a sister that did most of the leg work and really put that thing together. She was just given a bare bones idea by Karinga, and she basically did all the work and he took all the credit. That's one. Two, if we implemented these principles, we'd be further ahead than we are now. Plain and simple. That's all I'm going to say about the controversy about Kwanzaa for the time being. So with that, brothers and sisters, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for smashing the like button. I thank you all for your contributions, because this exercise was for us to study together and come to some conclusions. And I thank you all for helping me do that. And with that, I say a BB for Hodie and straight Black pride.